Mayhem in Melbourne. Everything goes upside down in the Down Under of the Australian Grand Prix. Captain Casual George Russell and His Royal Highness Sir Lewis Hamilton swamped the Red Bull of Dutch boy Max Verstappen in the opening lap. Max doesn't sound too happy about that. Safety cars deployed after the Maple Leaf ragamuffin Stroll punts Prince Charles Leclerc to the gravel. The race resumes. Briefly, until the Platinum Menace Albon loses control, spins into the wall, spewing gravel all over the track. Tough break for the Williams team as a red flag brings out a pause to the race. The track is clean and the marshals are cleared as the second standing start is underway. Hamilton leads Verstappen at the restart. Not this time, says Verstappen, as he breezes past like a summer day at the ocean side. The Silver Fox Alonso puts up a great struggle with Hamilton. The midfield runners, Norris, Gasly, fend off the aggressive Perez cutting through the pack. This race looks like a walkover for the raging Red Bull. Wait! A crash! Magnussen clipped the wall, flinging his tire halfway to the outback. What's this? Another red flag? Teams reset for the third standing start of this race with 2 laps to the end. Chaos! Chaos at the first turn! Oh, the mayhem! Sainz spins Alonso, and the 2 Frenchmen get up close and personal as they collide into the wall. Another lengthy red flag session is underway while the stewards decide the fate of this race. A while into the race, there's 3 former world champs. Max, Lewis, and Fernando share the podium and demote Sainz to 12th place. Better luck next time, Carlos.
Welcome to F1 or F Off, your audio pit stop for F1 news and race reviews. I'm your host, Idris.
And I'm Gabe.
So, I'm giggling here because the way we start episodes off, y'all, we have our notes, right? Our shared notes. And sometimes we don't see what the other types until, like, just as we're getting ready to record. And the episode name for this episode is hilarious. And you know what's really funny about it? I was literally thinking of something very similar to that, too. You know, like this morning, I was like, "Oh, it'd be great if we maybe had a Stranger Things reference, because it's Australia, and you know, maybe talk about the Down Under. That'll really grab people."
Well, Ben suggested that to me because I was talking to him about my newsreel segment, and I'll probably use it, which people will probably have already heard. But yeah, he's like, Mayhem in Melbourne, everything is upside down in the Down Under, you know. And I was like, that's perfect. And it's very aptly named for this race because, boy, you want to talk about mayhem. Whew.
So let me just say, those of you who are listening and this was your first race you ever watched, it's only downhill from here, baby. Like, it doesn't get better than this. This has everything, like drama. It has Carlos Sainz like making a big error. You're just like, where he's just like, no,
no, please, let them talk to me. That was so heartbreaking.
That was wild.
Yeah, no, this is. I think the only thing that probably could have made this more insane was rain. But yeah, no, this also has like lots of FIA just kind of riffing on what they're going to decide on the rules. So quite an interesting race. So let's just jump right into it. So
give us a track background today, Gabe.
Okay. Yeah, so this is obviously it's the Australian Grand Prix. It's raced at Albert Park Circuit, which is a kind of a big park right outside of Melbourne, Australia. It's a street circuit, so it has actual streets. I think it's a grade 1 by the FIA, and that's because it's got good runoff areas. The streets are nice and wide. It's a really, really good circuit for the sport. First race was in 1996, won by Damon Hill. It races in the day, kind of goes into dusk, like most of the tracks sort of on the calendar these days.
Definitely driver did that today.
Way into dusk, almost night. The driver with the most wins is Michael Schumacher. He has 4. And honestly, the fun fact about this track and sort of my memories of it too is that it holds the record for having the most season openers And it's 20
Really?
for 20, yeah, 22 years total. It was the
Wow.
opener for the season. So that was between 96 to 2005,
Okay.
2007 to 2009, and then 2011 to 2019. And that's the one that was important because for me, I started watching in like 2010, 2011. So
Yeah.
up until 2019, Australia was always the opener for me. And it was always a good opener too. It just felt right. So
It's
even
fun.
now, like watching this race, it feels like the official start of the season. It almost feels like the previous two were just test sessions, you know?
Yeah, I don't know how. I mean, it's great to see that the FIA again is visiting the entire globe with this world sport, right?
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. Something just feels right about Australia.
Right.
Kicking the season off. I think I'm very much in the same boat where when I started watching, Australia was the first track
opener.
of the year. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's got 3 DRS zones, 14 corners. It is definitely a high-speed track, but it's definitely one of the more fun ones, especially to watch. Get a really, really good sense of speed because there's a lot of stagnant cameras on track. The closeness of the walls really lets you sort of get that perspective. Yeah, I really like this track. I'm a fan.
What's crazy about it? You just mentioned that there's 3 DRS zones. For this year, there's 4, right?
Oh, right,
There's
that's
a new
right.
one new one they added, and I think that helped with a lot of these lap times. These were some bonkers lap times this year.
Yep.
I think
Red Bull specifically.
Yeah. Oh my God. They showed an infographic. I think it was during quali of how the track times have improved. You know, when Lewis got pole and when Lewis won, was just cleaning up from I think 2014 to 2019 of just how every year it seemed to just decrease by like 4 or 5 seconds as far as the fastest lap time. It's just bonkers.
Yeah, a lot of the racetrack records were set in like 2004 for a really long time. I think Michael Schumacher set like so many race lap records in that season, and these cars were 4 seconds faster than the 2004 Australian GP record by Schumacher. So that's wild. Yeah, definitely booking it around this track. And like you said, with those DRS zones, especially because this year, and this is something I definitely wanted to talk about, we can go into more depth into, but I'll just preface it too. So obviously, because of that, Red Bull have a really, really good showing because their DRS is really, really powerful this year. Yeah. But also some of the other cars that are a little more slippery, like Williams and even like Haas, I think. I feel like maybe, I don't know if the Haas is a little more draggy. I know the Williams is a very slippery car because during qualifying, Albon was putting in like purple middle sectors.
Yes.
And the middle sector of this
folks.
track. Yeah.
Purple mid sectors for Albon in a Williams.
Yeah, purple. Just in case you don't know, purple means overall fastest of everybody. So
also,
like
it's
when
the best
they're
color,
right? Yeah, like when you're watching Q3, green sector is a personal best, yellow is like a not an improvement, and then purple is best overall. And so yeah, he was setting purple midsections, and midsection is right where that's where all the speed is in this track is the middle sector. So that was insane to watch, and you know, to go in with qualifying, Albon, he was at P8.
Yeah.
Which for a Williams, that's good.
You know, it's really fun. I just got to say, I think the marriage between Williams and Albon is really, really nice. It feels right. He knows how to drive that car really well. And it's nice to see him in an environment that is not too much of a pressure cooker, right? I think that's what the problem was back when he was on Red Bull a few seasons back.
Right.
And I think it was just a bit too much for him. And you know, he seems to be really be thriving in Williams, and I'm just so happy for him, and I really wish him nothing but the best of success there. Yeah, Red Bull is high pressure, so now that he's sort of in the Mercedes sort of camp now with Williams, because Williams is like the sister team, I think he's going to be doing better there. I mean, hopefully. But yeah, what did you think of qualifying? It was a really, really good qualifier. Yeah. Really good. It was really fun. Yeah, so let's just go right to the result because there's something I wanted to talk about there. So for those that didn't see, both Mercedes qualified in the top 3. So you had your boy George Russell, the boy Wonderkind, P2, and then Lewis, P3. What was really interesting about it was that this was a good test case for the zero side pod concept, and it's really interesting to see the result that they got in quali after all of the hubbub last week about, you know, Toto going, well, if our car looks like the Red Bull, there'll be no shame in it, you know, which is right. That's, you know, and that's fine because you can't beat physics, and physics will always push you down a certain path, right? So I thought that was really interesting because the data that we'll have from both the qualifying day and race day, I think we'll be able to give them some more data points that they can maybe start taking a look at and analyzing, okay, why did things work so well qualifying, right? So one of the things I was thinking about is because the zero side pod concept clearly is aero limited. There's a big aerodynamic issue with it, and it's not just going to be only what you see on top going over the car, right? It's also what's going on underneath the car, right? Because they all have their own proprietary designs of what the floor looks like as far as how you're achieving that ground effect and washing it out, right? Part of me is kind of wondering if it's something to do with the fact that it was just about to rain, so you had, maybe denser air, maybe that improved the performance for the Mercedes. But I think one of the big takeaways for this weekend was just that the Mercedes had a really easy time when it came to putting energy into those tires and getting the temperatures up, which is what a lot of other teams struggled with. So I was really happy to see that as far as just like them solving a technical challenge, because we'll see if they're actually able to solve it, but I think they have more of an answer now than they did previously. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Right.
We'll see.
I think the Mercedes and the Aston, if my memory serves right, they were banging out the first sector and the last sector. They were doing really, really well, and those are the more technical portions of the track.
Yeah.
And I think that it shows it because I think the Mercedes and the Aston Martin are a lot more downforce heavy cars. They're not as slippery. They're not super fast in a straight line. They're pretty far off the pace in that regard. But around the turns, like around the actual technical parts of the course, they're really fast. And that's part of the reason why I think that the Aston Martins are doing so well as far as being able to like compete with the Mercedes in that regard. But it's also really surprising to me still that the Red Bull are just able to eke out these gaps as much as they can. Yeah. Well, speaking of Red Bull too, Perez was plagued with some issues with his car during the practice sessions and ended up beaching his car out in the gravel trap and was knocked out, which was a bit of a surprise. So he didn't even put in a lap, so he started at pit lane. Yeah.
I think it was right in Q1, right? The first session, right?
Yeah, first session.
So he said P20, which sucked. It just seems like for Checo, he'll have a great start. He'll have a great weekend, right? The prior weekend.
Right.
And then the next weekend he'll have some kind of gremlin or some issue. I just hope he gets it sorted out because this is his shot. This year he has a chance to take the championship. Do I think he's gonna win it? No, because I think Max is just so strong. Like Max is just so calm. He drives like he knows he's gonna win it. You know what I mean? Like.
Yeah, well, maybe that's part of his strategy, and that's why he gets really frustrated when he doesn't win because he hasn't, he's trying to manifest it in the car.
Yeah.
My last thought, just for qualifying, I'd just say, honestly, the winners of qualifying were definitely Albon, but also Hulkenberg and Gasly did really good. P9 and P10, they got into
Big
Q3.
time.
That's amazing for a Haas. So, good for them. Now, the race.
Dun, dun,
Pretty wild start. So Russell got off to a great start, took P1 from Max right out the gate.
Absolutely.
Which was wonderful. However, it was suddenly slowed down because Mr. Prince of Monaco, Charles Leclerc, got beached in the gravel after being punted by Stroll.
Yeah, we got to talk. There are multiple times during this race where I was just like, and Stroll does something.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Okay, he's now in the grass. What happened? Real quick about the start. So it wasn't just that Russell had an amazing start. Verstappen also had an awful takeoff from the line there. I don't know what that was.
Yeah. Well, and he missed a gear shift in I think turn 3 or 4 maybe. Because I was listening to the onboard. It was when Hamilton passed him.
Yeah.
Like he comes into the brake and you hear the rev go, like it goes way up. And you're like, oh no. Like, I think he missed a shift or something happened, and I think that really knocked him back. So yeah, he had a bit of a shaky start to the race. But yeah, Leclerc getting beached out there. Just poor Leclerc, man. Like I just
can't catch a break.
Honestly, Ferrari has just been having the worst luck. I know it's only 3 races in, and things can change, especially when you have 23 races. So we got like 20 races to go. A lot can change in that time.
Sure.
But still, man, like it's just. It doesn't give you a lot of confidence.
No,
and, if it was like the cars exploding or just being really, really, really bad performing, that would be one thing. But it's always sucks when you're just, pull the bad straw, and it's just not going to be, not doing it for you.
But they pull the bad straw every weekend though, right? Like
so far.
At a certain point, like it just seems like you're... it's their destiny to just pull the short straw, and I feel so bad because I don't really feel like it's an issue with Charles' driving or Carlos' driving or anything like that. It just, man, it's just a comedy of errors, it feels like.
Yeah, definitely. Comedy of errors is a good way to put it. That pulled out a safety car, which is the first one of the day. And he was obviously beached in a pretty dangerous part of the track, so there was a reason why you had to have that intervention. The race got underway a little bit again, like it kind of picked up, but then right as soon after lap 7, Albon loses control, and he was doing good, and he just hit the wall.
I mean, the only thing that makes sense for what happened and how his car just flew off the track like that was either a rear puncture or he just like lost it with the rears.
It was under braking, and it just looked like his car started sliding. So, he just lost the rear end. Maybe just something with the brake balance was off. Who knows? But
unfortunate.
Hulkenberg nearly picked him up.
Yeah.
Coming through that turn, which was a bit of a scary moment, but he scattered a bunch of gravel across the track, and that brought in a red flag. So that was red flag number 1. Right?
Actually, right before that, I think it was it was a yellow flag. They yellow flagged it, right? I think didn't they did safety car, right? And they did safety car, and
red
then
flag,
the reason I'm bringing this up is because Mercedes did something well. They split the strategy between George and Lewis, right? If you've noticed Mercedes their strategy approach over the last few races in last season, when they really started just messing up, they were just kind of a lot of the time just caught with their pants down, right? And they would double stack the drivers or just leave them both out and say, oh well, they're on different tires and it'll be okay. What they did today by putting George on, I think they brought him in to put him on the hards because he was the lead Mercedes, right? He was running in front of Lewis.
Yeah.
They left Lewis out, which was good because this is kind of a reflection of what they used to do when they were dominant when it came to these things, So I was happy to see that, and I was like, oh hell yeah, we're gonna see some good racing. And then they red flag it because of the gravel on the track from the incident. And immediately I'm like, oh, that sucks for George and anyone else who pitted. I think it was George and one other person who pitted. At that point, it was like, yeah, dude, you went from winning this race or leading the race to you got to make up some places just to get a podium.
Yeah.
And that put Lewis on the best position, honestly.
Yeah, no, that was definitely good for Lewis. And who knows? I mean, you don't know it's going to happen like that, but yeah, gravel across that track, it was just not in a good place. They had to go in and clean that up. There was nothing else they could do. So yeah, red flag session happens, and then they do the second start of the race, right? And Lewis was leading the race for a while, but Max was catching him really fast, and he did. Lewis was standing still once again with that DRS that's just so popular, or it's not popular, so powerful. And I understand, I was watching, there's a breakdown of sort of how Red Bull was able to kind of optimize its aero package in order to, work best with the DRS to just be able to get that much speed. And I don't know if that is just some evolution from last year's car because of Adrian Newey, but this is why I still continue to say that Red Bull complaining about having a less aero time in the wind tunnel in development was they were crying wolf. It was some big detriment, and I knew it wasn't going to be a big detriment.
Yeah, not at all.
I knew it. It's their car was solid last year. They barely had to tweak anything this year. They didn't miss a step. It's that whole thing is just complete nonsense. Anytime Christian's going to bring it up, I'm just going to call foul, boo, shut up. And then, unfortunately, after that happened, the other woe that happened for Mercedes at that point was that Russell retired with a catastrophic engine failure.
That was wild.
It turned into a Mad Max vehicle at one point there because it was just blowing flames out that exhaust, and it looked badass. But
yeah, it did.
It was Batmobile for a second.
Oh yeah. What sucked is that the engine was on fire at that point, right? Right. And he would have been able to have pulled into the pit, but Lance Stroll was right there blocking his way for him to actually run into, and to avoid having to go into, I think they went into a safety car there, right? Or at least a VSC virtual.
Yeah, I think it was a virtual safety car
because they were able to just push it back.
Right. Just watching that, it looks spectacular. It looks pretty like horrifying
yeah.
as it happens, but he was able to hop out pretty quick. The marshals are right there with the flamethrower, and the way these cars are designed too, I'm pretty sure they have some fail safes on the inside that prevents it from turning into a complete fireball.
Yeah.
So, there was a big plume of fire, and then it like kind of suppressed itself. So it wasn't a huge disaster, but definitely a bummer for Russell because he was doing so good. And then, after that, pretty much the mid portion of this section of this race was kind of what you would expect in this sort of
Very
Max
processional.
dominated area. I mean, Max was ahead, and the camera did not show anything on him.
Dude,
I really did enjoy the battle between Alonso and Hamilton. Like, as you were watching those gaps, like those guys were going toe to toe. Hamilton kept Alonso back under like a second or over a second gap, but Alonso was like kind of poking at it here and there because it was like 1.4, 1.1, 1.0, 1.2. Like they were definitely playing a little dance there. And
it was
both
so
of them,
beautiful.
Oh, they just great strategy, great way to hold on to each other. Perez too. Do you see Perez? Dude, every time he was passed, he was just passing people left and right.
Perez was driving like a madman. I love it. This is what I know I've said this about Lewis in particular, that I love watching Lewis start from like the pit lane, and I call it like a Lewis Hamilton like salvage race, right?
Right.
Anyone who's starting from like outside of the points, it's just so fun to watch them just carve through the field because they're just like next. It's so fun.
This is why I like the idea of doing a sprint race with a reverse grid.
Dude, it would be great to see.
You just get to see all the leaders like passing through traffic or trying to, and the midfielders get to battle a little bit.
Yeah.
I think overall it would be good for the drivers generally for experience and to get some battles in. I think it would be a cool thing to do.
Yeah.
But also, speaking of battles, like Perez was getting through, he was carving through the field, but then Gasly did a really, really good job. Him and Lando both had a good battles with Perez, but they were holding him off. I was surprised by Lando.
Yes.
I mean, especially because of McLaren being a McLaren. He was holding off Perez really
fighting
well. There was some good battles in there.
And just Gasly overall too, with him just c'est magnifique, just beautiful. It was beautiful to see. He drove so well, and it was just so fun to see him finally seem like in control of that car, right? Because I would say that, this is Gasly's first year on Alpine, right?
Yes.
Ocon has been here for a while. He knows that car pretty well, right? Even since back in its Renault days. Gasly is going to need some, a few races and some time to kind of get himself in a good relationship with that car, have a good connection with it. So to see him just do so well and for so long until later, it was really nice. It was really nice to see. And I was happy for him. I was like, hey, this is good to see because, him coming from AlphaTauri, he got that race win there, of course. But I don't think he, his move from AlphaTauri to Alpine, I think he was expecting to be up in the podium places a lot higher than he has been previously. So this is a good reflection of that.
Speaking of AlphaTauri, did you hear that they were thinking about changing their name again?
What are they going to go to?
I have no idea. I have no idea, but apparently AlphaTauri is as a clothing brand is not it's not recognizable in almost every country that we race in. And
wait, they're a fashion brand?
Yeah, AlphaTauri is a fashion brand. I saw a commercial for their clothing and I'm just like, what? Yeah, they sell like fashion clothes. And apparently they're considering changing the name because it's just there's not a lot of name recognition, and so I think they're looking for a rebrand. Honestly, that's fine because honestly, I kind of preferred Toro Rosso a little bit more.
I thought it was a way better name.
It feels like a better name. I mean, it made sense back then because it was like an Italian sort of run Red Bull sister team. So like Toro Rosso, Red Bull, like that.
Yeah.
That just felt perfect.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're going to turn it into. Who knows? But it's still going to be obviously Red Bull something, some sort of thing. Who knows? But yeah, that's the only thing I really have anything to say about AlphaTauri even for this race because they were just pretty much non-existent. Nick DeVries had a little moment where he got kind of chucked up in the air, but he got
beached by Sargent at like.
Okay, well then let's talk about that. We're on the definitely on the verge here. This is the real meat of this race, and it happened right at the end. And it's wild.
So here's a quick thing. So Gabe has a section here, just all caps chaos.
In more ways than one.
It's so true. I have never seen. This was like watching Rent, but being, everyone in Formula One is a character, right? Like it's like 525,600 penalties. Just like it's just ridiculous.
Instead of being able to pay the rent, they can't finish the race.
They can't finish the race because they don't know the rules.
What are the rules? Yeah. Okay. Well, so this all started with Magnussen right at the end. What was it? Lap 55?
55. It was lap 55
of 58 laps.
Yeah, of 58 laps.
Magnussen clips the wall, just yeets his tire into the air, and it just goes rolling down the road.
It was
Pretty
dramatic,
intense.
dude.
Yeah. They did an aerial shot, and I just remember seeing a bunch of sparks from Magnussen's car, and I'm like, "That's not. That can't be normal." And then they zoomed in on him with a puncture. I'm like, "Oh."
Yeah.
So obviously the tire was sitting out in the track. There was debris all over the place. So they pulled out the safety car initially, but then they pulled in. So that's safety car intervention 3, mind you.
Yeah.
And then they did a red flag, which is the second red flag of this race.
Yeah.
So
unheard of.
Yeah, at 50
Well,
at 55 laps. It's a red flag, right? So, okay, the teams reorganize. They're in their positions. They clean up the track. They do all of that, and we're getting our third standing start of this race. And they go around. I think they were like, okay, what we're going to do is 2 racing laps to the end is what they decided to do, right? So we do the third standing start, and then turn 1. I posted on our Twitter. You should go and see it. I did a retweet. Somebody retweeted like the Formula 1 2022 video game and like glitching where all the cars are like hopping around like in the start. That's like exactly what it felt like. I mean, Sainz flies in the inside, punts Alonso, who was in third. He spins out and thankfully doesn't break his car, but he spins out, hits the side of the track. You had Sergio went off the track, went barreling down. He has
to go wide. Yeah.
He has to go wide. Everybody's all bunched up. And then right to turn like 2, 3, the Alpines collide against the wall in a spectacular fashion, just wreck themselves.
Like Gasly did not even see Ocon to his right and just smashed him right into the wall.
Just smashed. And then just a little bit down the road, Sargent punts De Vries into the gravel.
Just out of nowhere.
Just out of nowhere. I think Stroll ends up at the same time just like losing under braking and just like rolls into the gravel. And the important part of this, okay, so this all happens within like the first 3 turns. And so they call a red flag again.
Yeah.
Because
red flag 3, y'all.
Red flag 3. And so the cars all return. And mind you, they were only supposed to do 2 laps to the end. The driving around the track, it's not considered it's not necessarily considered a racing lap, but it's still a lap of the distance. So they get back into the pit lane under the red flag. This is where it starts getting complicated, and like you and I can talk about this, but it was really confusing at the time. But to try and keep it as simple as possible, like grid positions for each of the cars, it's designated for whatever reason, whether it's qualifying or just under when a red flag happens, when a safety intervention happens. The grid is locked in, like it's said, like that's where the grid is, right? In order to constitute a continuation of the race, they have to go through at least one section of the racetrack in order for it to be able to completely decipher what the grid was.
Yep.
And unfortunately, because the chaos happened so early, they were trying to determine what the grid was actually going to be because the red flag hit before the leaders actually got through the first sector.
Right.
And so there was this really long waiting period. Alonso was in the back. He had gotten back to the pit lane, and Aston Martin were arguing that because they didn't go through a full sector, then the previous grid position should be reinstated, and they need to figure it out from there, which is ultimately what they did, minus the Alpines who crashed themselves up, so everybody behind them got booted upward.
So one thing to note here, too, what sucks about, and I think this is the right way to do it. Like, I think based on the rules, this makes sense. But what this did was it completely screwed Tsunoda and Hülkenberg, so AlphaTauri and Haas, out of some really good points, right?
Haas was up to 4th.
After all of that, Hülkenberg with Haas is in P4, and Tsunoda with AlphaTauri is in P5 because of all that just chaos that ensued. So we lost,
had up to P12, I think, was the attrition rate of this race after when everything was said and done.
Yeah, so you... insane. So you can imagine that Haas really wanted things to stay the way they were because this was the haul of a century for them.
Right. Yeah. I know Jensen Button said it was the right call, and I would agree, not just as an Alonso stan, but I do think that like it would be unfair to continue that sort of position even like if that happens in the first corner and it's a red flag and you have 20 laps left to go,
yeah,
it would be unfair to be like, well, this is what they would do if they had 20 extra laps to go. They would do the same thing. They'd be like, well, that didn't really constitute a full lap. We're going to go back to the previous grid. And it's sort of like, here's a little bit of sports history for you guys, Cleveland specific sport history. You didn't think I was going to drop this one on you, but
no,
if you've never heard of Bottlegate, you should look it up. So the Cleveland Browns, this is a similar sort of thing where the Cleveland Browns were in a playoff game and there was a call on a play that happened, but the call didn't go through because there was some issue with the radio connection thing or whatever from the sidelines. So they ran another play that also had a flag. And when the flag was called on that play, what they did was retroactively, they went and they ruled on the previous play, even though it had already gone through. And that was actually a violation of NFL rules. They were not supposed to do that, but they did it anyway. And so people got really mad and they started throwing their plastic beer bottles onto the field. And then what ended up happening from there is that the referees were just like, well, this sucks. Whoa, it's dangerous. We're going to leave. The game's over. And they didn't even finish out the rest of the game because people were throwing bottles. It's sort of dangerous. A simulation, like it's sort of a thing like that where it's like, if you can't make a determination from one point forward, you have to go to the previous sort of point or just continue to go with what had already been pre-established. So so effectively they went back through that. They did a little processional lap, checkered flag, win. So man, Alonso, I'm telling you what, Aston Martin has sucking up all the good luck this year because
big time.
Alonso is just gonna third place via technicality his way to a world drivers championship or something at this point.
You know what, man? It is. This championship is still anyone's to get. So one thing I do want to say about that whole incident that Sainz caused, because like without any doubt Sainz is the one who caused this issue, right? When he bumped into Alonso spins out, right? And then you have all this chaos that ensues behind him, so he can directly be linked to causing 4 cars to just be out, right? So it sucks because those 4 cars, they didn't even get a chance to try to get back in that order, right? And it's frustrating. I really feel annoyed for those 4 cars who got taken out, but Sainz was given a 5-second penalty.
Yes.
So part of me, that I have a lot of feelings about this. I think that goes both ways. So on one hand, yes, the penalty happened and he should be given a penalty for that, right? Because he caused an incident and he's at fault. Tisk tisk, gets a boo-boo, and he's dealt the penalty, right?
Right.
But man, that sucks in the way that he was given the penalty because there was no racing, right? So if it's a 5-second penalty, he just goes straight to the back of the grid, right?
Yep.
He gets P12.
Which was good for Sonoda and Hulkenberg.
I'm happy.
Sonoda got into the points at that point.
Exactly. I'm happy for those guys, but man,
if that didn't happen, it would have been Yuki Tsunoda's 4th 11th place finish in a row.
Oh man,
which is like a record that nobody has had. Man, like apparently that was going to be a record of a driver finishing in the same place outside of the podium.
Yeah,
wild. I agree. I think that it's a broader discussion. I don't know.
Is it too harsh? Right?
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't know. It feels a little harsh to me. I mean, but also it's like, what other kind of alternative penalties could they have done? I mean, they could have given him a grid spot penalty for the next race. Maybe like a one grid spot penalty would be. It's all about the severity of it, right?
Right.
And that's just something I think the FI really has to think about and they really have to figure out because there are some penalties that are really rough. Well, now it is time for us to give what we're going to be calling our deep cuts of the race. How about you go first? Overall, what was all your takeaway? What were all your cuts?
First off, what an insane race. That was such a spectacle. I started watching the race thinking like, oh, I should be done in just about 2 hours. And then I saw because I didn't watch it live, right? I watched it the next morning. It was super late my time when it was running. And I pull it up on F1 TV and I'm like, 3 hours. Nani? What happened? And so it was funny too, because I got to like lap 55 and I was like, dude, there's like another hour that's left. What is about to happen, right?
Right.
And just bam, just nuts.
Yes, right.
Like, just bonker stuff ensues. So yeah, amazing race. Well, I should say spectacle of a race. That penalty for Carlos, I think there's a deeper question there about the FIA needing to maybe reevaluate some of the rules and how they're applied, because I'm not saying it's not fair what happened to him. That just feels really severe. And I think maybe this is the event that causes the FIA to say, okay, if someone commits a penalty or requires a penalty during a weird incident like this, maybe it's a 2.5 second penalty that's only applied during a safety car restart or a standing start restart. I don't know, but I don't. He did mess up. He did cause the issue, right?
Right.
And I think one of the things that I'm a little burned about is he caused the issue, yes, but then everything was restarted prior to him causing that issue.
Right.
Should his issue, or should the penalty that caused all that also go away too? I don't know.
It's tough because I was thinking like, oh, well, maybe 5 seconds is too many seconds for Formula One to be dishing out in penalties, especially when like the drivers are a second away from each other most times. But at the same time, that could also be a slap on the wrist for somebody who, who's way ahead, and like they're ahead by 6 seconds and you take away 1 second, then that's not much at all. So it is, It is tough. I almost like grid spot penalties more than 5 second penalties for punishment, because it doesn't, it's tough because on the one hand, teams could run the risk of like being aggressive and reckless and just being like, whatever, 2 grid spot penalties, not a big deal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And be willing to just deal with that or be reckless because they don't think that it's that big of a punishment. But at the same time, it does make it feel like it wouldn't stifle a race as much if they did. The penalties were for grid spots later in other races. Is like then it just puts them on the back foot starting in the next race. So there's still that sort of incentive of like, you can't mess up because you're just going to screw yourself over for the next race.
Yeah.
It's a tricky thing. It's really, really tricky. It seems like financial fines don't really seem to do much. We need to find the thin line in the sand on this, because in some circumstances, a 5 second penalty is too much.
Big time.
Then in other sort of circumstance, it's really not anything. Like when Alonso was able to serve his 5 second penalty under safety car, that kind of like nullifies it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
What else you got?
Alfa Romeo and AlphaTauri have been really disappointing this season.
Oh my God, so disappointing.
Man, it's like they're not even there, dude. It breaks my heart because
especially the Alfa Romeos.
Oh, they look so fast.
I know,
but it drives so slow.
They're like lowriders, or like they're like hot rods, right? It's like hot rods are loud and spectacular and cool, but they are not quick things all the time.
Yeah. The other thing was Mercedes and McLaren and Aston were really fun to watch this race.
Yes.
So kudos to those guys for really getting the job done. McLaren, honestly, they've needed a break for a while. So for them to get like some kind of bone here, it was nice. And the last thing I'll say, what a stacked podium that was. You had 3 world champions up there. You have, I think I saw somewhere that there were three records set with that podium, and I think they were in particular. I can just pull it up.
There was I know there were 11 total world championships.
11 world championships. 172 most victories, and then the most podiums, 373. That is a stacked podium.
You know who's pulling the weight with those with those records, though. Lewis with his 103 race wins. You know what I mean? Like it's not like, it's amazing, all of them. Like, Alonso has 2 world championships, as does Max, and then Lewis is up there with his 7. Like, it's like
one of these things is not like the other. But no, it's still really impressive though. This is amazing. Like,
oh yeah.
When are we gonna see something like this again? I hope we continue to see this podium this season. This would be amazing, because that means Ferrari has fully punched themselves in the face, and they're out cold for the entire season.
Yes, I just really hope that Aston Martin continues to have a solid season this year.
Yeah, they're so fun to watch.
I want Alonso to win at least one race. I want to see at least one Alonso win. I want them to at least get second, if not third, in the constructors, unless Red Bull completely implodes. That kind of leads in to my sort of deep cuts for this race. I do think that Aston Martin is really sucking up all that luck this year. I think that they are going to be a team to watch in the lower speed tracks because Red Bull has the aero advantage on all the really high speed circuits. So Red Bull is going to be really powerful at Monza. They're going to be really powerful in places like Belgium, where there's like long straightaways, big long, sections where they can really use that aero advantage. But I'm going to say like Monaco, Singapore, even Miami, Japan, those are going to be tracks to look out for Aston Martin because they're quite a bit more technical. It's all going to be about their turning speed and their stability. Because Max has been wrestling the Red Bull a lot, which is why it's also very strange that they, they're so fast, but also wrestling with the car. It seems really weird to me. And I do genuinely think that unless Red Bull is cheating somehow, they've got some advantage nobody's paying attention to, they're going to continue on this trajectory, I am imagining.
Do you think they're having some issues?
This is the thing. I don't know. I don't know if they're just saying that they're having issues because they want people to think they're having issues.
Sure.
Or if they are genuinely having issues, but the car is just so fast that it doesn't matter. Like, I don't, it's so weird. Like, I can't remember a time where the fastest cars on track, like the best cars on track were like just a handful. You know what I mean? Like most of the time it's like, they're just really smooth and like well planted, because that gives all the driver all the confidence, right? Mm-hmm. That's just going to make him go fast. So like Max and Perez having all these issues and still like locking out the front row, it feels really weird to me. It feels really fishy. I don't get it. But on that same vein, Williams, I think, is another team that we're going to have to look at for the opposite. The high speed tracks are going to be places where you look at Williams because they are really slippery. So I think that Williams is going to be putting up a fight at Monza. I also think they're going to be putting up a fight at Belgium because they're especially with Albon, that slippery car, those things are fast. I think they topped out at like max. The Red Bulls are at like 364 kilometers an hour, and the Williams are like 2 or 3 miles an hour off of that. Okay. But it's like Red Bull, Ferrari, and then Williams as far as top speed. And so I think Williams are going to, any place where they're going to have a high speed track, I think they're going to be able to put in some lap times that are probably going to surprise some people. I think Haas is potentially could be doing some higher finishes.
I think so too.
Provided that they don't have reliability problems like they have in the past, because they put on a good show. And as far as Alpine goes, like Alpine, I think they have enough to really do well in the midfield. But we're just seeing a really interesting battle between Aston Martin, Mercedes, and Ferrari for the number 2 and number 3 spot. So,
do you remember when we were talking about our season 23 preview and thoughts? Yeah. Mm-hmm. I said, "Oh yeah, I could see Aston and Mercedes fighting for P3," and you were like, "You're assuming Ferrari's gonna be P2?"
Yeah. Well, because that was my thought. I was like, oh man, I don't know.
Man, Gabe Stradamus, y'all. What?
It's like you don't watch this sport for like 13 years and then not have some ideas or, thoughts about stuff. And it's funny, like a lot of things that I think about are like either other people are talking about it or it's sort of coming true. So yeah, I mean, who knows? We'll kind of see how that goes. But man, yeah, I guess that was that. I mean, what a race. Shout out to the safety car for putting on a good show for the crowd. And that was funny. So I watched this with my brother, and I told him, remember when we were at Austin, they had the Aston Martin safety car, remember? Yeah. And I always assumed that the safety car was, going pretty quick, but was, pretty much just kind of a controlled, sort of lap time going around the track, They are going balls to the walls.
They're hauling.
as far, like just hard acceleration as fast as those sports cars can go. And even still behind them in the F1 cars are like, they're going too slow, need to speed up. It's just like, man. So like I told my brother that I'm like, these things like is going as fast as it can. And it's not like a slouch sports car. Like it's not just like a Miata or something. Like this is like a serious high performance car.
Yeah.
And there's still, it's just like, it might as well just be like a, you know, a Kia in the right lane, you know, when it comes to these guys, and they're like BMWs flying past them in the fast lane, like
with no turning signals.
With no turning signals. No turning signals in F1. We should know that.
Oh, I meant more about the BMWs.
Do you think BMW will ever make a comeback into the sport?
You know, I guess it depends on what their technology portfolio looks like for the next 5 to 10 years, but
fair.
I don't know. I feel like they're probably not too bothered.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know Porsche apparently is not going to be in anymore. They like backed out of it. I guess 2026 was going to be like the year if anybody wanted to jump in. Yeah, well, that was Australia, everybody. Thanks for listening to F1 or F Off. You can find us anywhere that you listen to podcasts. If you want to hit us up, please do. You can find us at Instagram and Twitter at F1 or F Off, or you can email us at F1 or F Off podcast at gmail.com. We would really like to hear from you.
Yeah, also, if you guys like the pod, leave us a review. Let us know what you think. 5-star reviews would be great.
Yeah. If
also, share with your friends and family.
Yeah, if you think we're complete scrubs and you hate us, sure, you can leave. We might not read it, but you can leave it. But yeah, no, we'd like to hear your feedback. We want to know ways that we can improve or things that we're doing right, doing wrong, whatever might be the case.
Talk to y'all later.
Peace out. Don't go chasing waterfalls.